Hi everyone, I'm Steve Bowman from Conscious Governance. I've been working in the board and CEO space for close on 40 years and have come across some of the best and some of the worst in board techniques and strategies and behaviours, and I'm happy to share that with you today. Our focus today is on board only or in-camera sessions of the board.
Hi, welcome to Governance Bites. My name is Mark Banicevich, and as you just heard, I again have the pleasure of spending time with Steve Bowman. Steve, thank you very much for sharing your expertise with me. It's really appreciated. And this is the topic that I haven't covered yet, and been one that's been on my list, wanting to cover it for quite some time. And as you said, you wrote an article on this around 20 years ago. And so a great person to have a conversation about this with. My first question with you, for you on this topic is, how do you define board only time and what purpose does it serve?
So often you'll have come across something called in-camera sessions of the board. Now that's an ancient Latin term, which is, if you're an ancient Latin, it still makes sense, but it means out of session. The term most commonly used these days is board only time. That is where there are no staff, including the managing director, if they also happen to be a staff member and also a director. So board only time, and the purpose of the board only time is to talk about those issues where you don't want to be influencing the perception of the staff in how you go about having these conversations, where it would be uncomfortable for the staff to be involved, in particular the chief executive or the managing director. So typically board only time is where we talk about behaviour of directors. You know, if someone's misbehaving or behaving badly, or the most typical instances of that is where someone is acting really aggressively, thinking they're asking questions, but what they're actually doing is going for the jugular of people and using questions as a weapon. So you either take that offline and have a chat with them, or if that's not working, then you use the board only time and say, okay, you need to be aware this is what's happening. We'll help you change the behaviour, but you do have to change that behaviour. You don't want to do that in front of the CEO or the other staff.
It'll undermine it.
It'll undermine it, and also, if it's the CEO where this is an issue, then the chair has a conversation with them, and that's picked up in their key performance indicators. So,
yes.
Typically the board only time is when we're talking about how the board's functioning and what it is that we need to do to raise the level up. I've got one board at the moment, for example, where there's a couple of the directors on there that all they want to do is to prove the other directors wrong. And the issue with that is it's a total distraction from how that board can actually function. Yeah. You know, to me, the biggest issue facing boards these days is not necessarily how can we be more strategic, how can we better understand risk. It's bad behaviour. And that bad behaviour can be an incredible distraction. If anyone who's listening to this has never been on a board where there's any bad behaviour, good on you. I guarantee you'll come across it at some stage. So board only time is a really powerful way for that to occur. Performance management of the chief executive, there's conversations that the board need to have there about both the process and then updates and monitoring of that. That should be done without staff involved, including if it's the managing director or the chief executive. So that performance management. And then looking at things like succession planning for the CEO's position. So those sorts of things where it's not appropriate to have the chief executive involved in those conversations. Now, the trick behind the board only sessions is that they're not there to make decisions. Only the board can make decisions. So if in the board only time they've said, here's what needs to happen, that needs to be minuted in the board minutes, because it's the board minutes that are the formal recognition of what's been going on. You can keep minutes of the board only session.
Okay.
Of which only the people who were there can see it, the directors, not the chief executive. But they should be very factual and not get into he said, she said, they said. And if any decision arises from that, it must be in the board minutes itself, because the board is the legal authority.
Yes.
The board-only session is just a tool.
So are you saying that a decision can be made in board-only time and then minuted? Or
no, we can choose to do something in the board-only time and then it can be minuted and then becomes a decision.
Okay. So does that decision have to be ratified to then get included in the minutes? Or how does that process work? So, for example, particularly in a scenario where you might have 7 people around the table, and including a managing director. The managing director's not there.
Yes.
So you really shouldn't be making a decision without the managing director having an opportunity to
around the
involve,
business,
right?
strategy, risk and so on, but that's not what these sessions are about.
Right, okay.
So this is about, here's how we're going to do the performance management of the CEO,
yes.
right? And then the decision is to engage an outside company, for example. That is then minuted.
Just gets added to the minutes.
Added into the minutes.
Right.
Or it could be, here's the behaviour that we need to modify. And what we've seen from our directors is that they haven't been reading their board papers the way they should be. I'm not going to pick up anyone in particular, Mark, but obviously there's been some instances where people haven't read their board papers. That needs to improve.
So that goes in the minutes?
No, that doesn't go in the minutes. There's no decision.
Right, okay.
It was just a conversation that we had.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense. There's another example that you gave. Some things that you said you would minute, but you wouldn't make available to management. So do you have a separate document for those?
If you're using Board Portal, and boards should be using board portals, right? There's some really good board portals around. I mean, the New Zealand homegrown one, which is one of the top 3 in the world, is Board Pro.
Yes.
If you're not using a board portal, you really should be using it as a board, because that keeps in a very safe, secure environment the things that the board need to be keeping, and it also helps streamline processes. So you can set up a section where only the directors have access to that particular series of papers in there, but they should be minimalist. They might, here are the 2 topics that were talked about, all right? Any decisions that come out from that have to be minuted in the actual board minutes themselves.
Right. I think the answer to the next question is implied from what you've said, but I'm going to ask it to allow you to be more specific. What are the key benefits that boards gain from having time without management present?
It means that we can talk about stuff that we'd feel uncomfortable if the staff are in the room. So we can talk about, look, how are we going as a board? Do you feel comfortable with our diversity of view around it? How's it going with the papers that we're getting from the staff? Are they actually helping us focus on what we need to do? How do we find our level of inquiry and curiosity as directors? Is there anything we need to do there? There might also be instances, the stories I could tell of where this doesn't work well. I've one just recently where there's some evidence of some directors speaking against the decisions of the board out in the public arena. Now you think that doesn't happen. I'm sorry, it does. So that needs to be called out, and it's best to do it not just with the individual, but actually have the peer pressure of the board knowing this is not acceptable behaviour. One of the biggest issues always is if bad behaviour is not called out, it festers, it goes on. And unless it's called out and managed in the role of the chair in this is to make sure it is actually called out. The other directors can be a contribution to that, but in the end, if it's not called out, it will absolutely distract the board from what it needs to be done. And I've seen many, many instances of where that's the case.
And it would continue.
And it continues on and becomes the way we do things around here, an unwritten ground rule.
So board only time is a really effective tool to continually improve the process of what's happening in the boardroom.
Correct.
Those relationships.
The key thing is that for the chair to understand what board only time is, do some reading up about it. Find out. There's all sorts of really good articles around what board only time is and what should be included. So have a little list of those things, and then remind the directors that we on a regular basis. The best time to have a board only time is when you don't need it. No. So what many boards do is that they start off a board meeting with board only time, and then the staff come in. Right?
Okay.
So if there's nothing major to talk about, it's a 3-minute meeting.
Yes.
If there is something, then we've allocated some time for it.
Right.
The last thing you want to do is to call a board-only time where all the staff are out there, they're about to come in, and you say, now hang on a second, just sit and wait for an hour while we have board-only time. And then the CEO's sweating, going, what the hell's this? Have I got a job? What's going on? You don't want that.
No.
So some boards do a board-only time at the end, some do it at the start, and some do it both at the end and at the start. And they shouldn't take that long. So, if you've got an unexplained board-only time, everyone gets nervous. It should be managed.
Yeah, right. That makes absolute sense. What risks or governance failures can arise if organisations don't have board-only time?
Bad behaviour continues. There's no self-reflection as a board on how we're going. The biggest issue sometimes is without that board-only time to talk about setting up the parameters for the CEO's performance review, that it's left up to the chair to do it, who's got no experience in it. So one of the biggest issues that we find, and again for those listening here, please take this one to heart, if you want to lose a good CEO, mess up their performance management process. Best way to get rid of a good CEO. And typically many boards do not have experience in how to do high performance management monitoring. So get some external advice or put someone onto a subcommittee that actually has experience in that area, so that when you're doing your performance management, setting your KPIs or your performance indicators for the CEO and possibly the senior executive team, you've got some experience and skills around there, rather than, well, we've never done it, I've never had it done to me, so therefore I don't know, so let's try and work out what this means. And that's why in many instances, and I would see thousands of these a year, you see the performance indicators for the CEO and there's 2 pages of a whole lot of dot points, which is essentially a reflection of their job description. That's not performance management.
Right, absolutely. Should it be a standing agenda item or should it only be used when needed?
It should be a standing agenda item. So the most hygienic way of doing this is for it to be an expectation. And that the CEO or the managing director knows that the purpose of this is to do the following things. The really good boards will actually let the managing director or the staff know that here are the 2 topics that we're talking about in this board-only session. Now, if they're commercial in confidence or something along those lines, you may or may not want to let the CEO know, but it's really up to the chair on how to manage that. But the best way to do it is to have them as a standing agenda item.
And that transparency that you suggest there would take away that fear factor for the staff sitting around outside going, oh my God, what's going on?
The number of stories I've heard, and I've been involved in this myself, I was once asked to come in and talk to a board about X, Y and Z. So it was to start at 6:30 in the evening. And then I got there and the chair said, oh, would you mind waiting? We're just going into an in-camera session. An hour later, I was pissed.
Yeah, I bet.
Because they hadn't set things up in advance and they were actually talking about the report that I was about to deliver to them, whereas an in-camera session should never be about that, nor do you keep people waiting there. It was just bad form.
Yeah.
So I've seen other instances where it's called and immediately the CEO goes into, what have I done wrong?
Yes.
Right? That it should never be the case. If they've done something, then you need to alert them that we're going to be talking about this. There needs to be some sort of discussion around what that means. There's one just recently where they went into an in-camera session to talk about the behaviour of the CEO and how it was putting the organisation at risk and what are our steps forward in doing this. And when they came out of that meeting, they said to the CEO, okay, so we're going to set up some new performance management indicators. We've got a 3-month time frame around it. This is pretty serious. We need to talk to you about that. The chair will spend time going through it with you. So at least, so there's transparency there.
Yeah, right, okay. What good practices ensure that these sessions are structured and purposeful rather than just informal chats?
So sometimes an informal chat can be quite good for a few minutes. So, in many instances, how do you think we go? This is a really touchy subject that we're coming up against. There's all sorts of implications with stakeholder engagement, a whole range of things, and our interactions with staff. What do you think the best way forward would be, or something like that? So that might be a conversation. But typically, they should be structured in that here are the two topics that we're going to talk about. You can even, as part of your annual board work calendar, structure some of those things. So we're going to talk about the CEO's performance management process in November of this year, and that'll be part of the board-only session that we do. So you know in advance.
So it's part of your board plan.
Yeah, part of your board plan. And again, it's the maturity of the board. Too many directors see a board-only session as something where a grenade's been thrown into the middle of the room and everything's going to hell and high heaven and we need to sit down and really do crisis management. No, the board-only session should be well planned out what you need to. If there is a crisis, then you know where that comes up. It'll come up in that board-only session.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think you've answered this already, but I'll ask it just in case there's anything else you wanted to bring out. How do you maintain a healthy relationship with the CEO while preserving the confidentiality of certain matters that are discussed in board-only time?
Well, the first thing is that you make your board-only time a standard thing, so it's not just when there's a problem.
Right.
Second thing is that you let the CEO know of any decisions that were made out of that immediately. It can be after the board meeting, or it can be sometimes if there's a real issue, that sometimes they'll hold it at the end of the board meeting. There'll be something they want to do. It's a decision that's been made. It'll be ratified at the next board meeting, but then the chair takes the CEO aside and says, we need to work our way through this.
Right.
That came out of that. Again, it depends on the situation, but the key thing is it should be a standard process. It's a part of the board's hygiene, but it's not just about CEO. It could be about director behaviour. It could be about a process. It could be about a particular real perceived or potential conflict of interest that we need to figure out how we're going to deal with.
Succession planning, as you said before.
Could be that. Yep.
Yeah. Yes. Are there situations that may call for additional board-only time where you may have to call it very quickly and
There's always that possibility. I mean, if it hits the fan, then you do what you need to do.
Right.
Typically, the board-only time is not about out-of-the-blue surprises. And that sometimes happens. You can always call a board-only time meeting that isn't attached to a board meeting.
Right.
It's up to the chair. The chair has the power to do that.
Okay. And as you said before, you'll have a couple of items that you're going to discuss. Essentially, you have an agenda for your board-only time that may cover off any other matters that arise. You'll take minutes of that time, and there'll be some that only the board will have access to, and others that will get added to the formal minutes that the CEO and
if
everyone
there's a
else
decision
has access to.
associated.
If there's a decision that is made.
So the trick of the trade there is that you can keep notes of that board-only time, but they're not formal minutes as such.
Yes, right.
And you're best off to keep them as minimalistic as possible, because they are discoverable.
Right.
So you just want to have items of fact in there rather than a whole lot of discussions around who said what. And then if there is a decision that comes out of that, it has to be minuted in the board minutes, because then it becomes a formal decision of the entity.
Right. What are the most common mistakes that boards make regarding board-only time?
Oh, they use it as a bitch session. So they use it to complain about something rather than, behaviour is often seen as an incident, whereas if you look at it appropriately, you look to see, well, what's the issue behind this? So if a director does something, for example, you can censure them for doing that, but the better way of doing it is say, well, what's the issue behind this piece of behaviour that occurred? It'll have an impact on stakeholder engagement. Okay, we need to talk about stakeholder engagement then. This is just an instance of where that can have an impact on stakeholder engagement. Right. The bigger issue for us is how we engage with stakeholders and the confidentiality confidentiality of information, and the impact that has on how the market perceives us. That's a bigger question than just what that one director did.
Right. Yes.
So you raise it to the next level, which is what are the strategic implications behind this for us. Same thing with behaviour of the CEO, for example. There's an instance of what happened. Isn't that terrible? Yeah. Well, what's the strategic issue behind that for us? So you can actually raise and elevate that level of conversation.
Solve a deeper problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. One final question for you, slightly off topic. What advice would you give to a first-time chair?
Do a chairing course. So one of the things, typically we're not trained to be chairs. You can see other chairs as you go through, but they may not be particularly good.
Yeah, right.
So I've seen many chairs who've taken up on the chairing position and they've based how they chair on the bad behaviour of other chairs. So that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So get some training on how to be a chair. Now, it's not the content that's the main thing in a chair training course. It's the fact that you mix it with other chairs.
Right.
And you get to talk about some of the tricks of the trade and some of the things that you come across. The key thing is to understand, as chair, you own the agenda, not the board. The board doesn't own the agenda, so you own the agenda. At law, it's been shown in many case law studies that the chair owns the agenda. Now, they will get input from their directors. You will listen to your directors, but in the end, you as chair are the one who owns the agenda. So if your agenda is not strategic, that's on you as a chair, not on the board. If your agenda is all over the place, that's on you as the chair. You have total control over that agenda. If a director wants something put on the agenda, they can petition you as chair to put it on there, but it's your choice as a chair whether it goes on there or not.
Right.
So, having a bit of training in that area. Sometimes some chairs get themselves mentors from other chairs who've actually been really good at what they do.
Right.
It's a great, having a great chair is amazingly good for the organisation. Having a chair who doesn't know how to manage behaviour, just wants to get on with everyone, they're there to read through an agenda that has been the same agenda that's been there for forever and ever. That's not what you need. You need someone who can actually be the chair.
Steve, again, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
I really enjoy our conversations. Sure. Let's do it again. And I'll see you again soon.
Bye.
Thank you for watching this episode of Governance Bites. We have more episodes on YouTube and your favourite podcast channel, where I interview directors and experts on various topics relating to boards of directors and governance. We'd love to see you back, and please like, subscribe, and share the videos and podcasts.